Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Hare Krishna, welcome to devotees back to Books Are the Basis, organized by the ISKCON Ministry of Education. We're talking about the importance of reading Srila Prabhupada's books. And today we are very happy to have a special guest, a personality, a devotee, who has basically spent his whole life very closely with Srila Prabhupada's books. And this is His Grace Dravida Prabhu. Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Haribol.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us for this session.
Sure.
I personally am very excited to hear from you because Dravida Prabhu has been serving at the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust for more than 45 years, right?
Yeah.
So I mean,
in 75.
So that's really someone who is very close to Prabhupada's books. Dravida Prabhu joined ISKCON in 73 in Brooklyn, New York. Received initiation in January 74 by Srila Prabhupada, and basically served his whole life in the service of Prabhupada's books, the BBT, editing Back to Godhead magazine, and of course also Prabhupada's books. And he's also preaching, especially in North America, ISKCON San Diego and other places. And also, Dravida Prabhu, you're also known for your very expert reciting of Sanskrit shlokas. And so, yeah.
I can give a little sample of that when the time comes.
Yeah, we would like to talk about the importance of also learning shlokas and the Sanskrit language. That'd be great to cover that as well. Maybe we can start with, you could share your first encounter with Srila Prabhupada's books. How did you come in touch with Prabhupada's books? What do you remember from that incident, and how did you join, and then how you start to serve?
I was a child of the 60s. I grew up, I came of age in the 60s. And I lived in the Lower East Side for a year in 1968, about a block from Tompkins Square Park. And I would go, I didn't encounter devotees in the park, but I was somewhat of a street musician. I played the flute, I played bongo drums and things like that. And I was always looking for other people to jam with, And so I would go to the park, and it would often be some people playing conga drums there, and I would play my flute to them. So I remember because the 26th Second Avenue temple was open, and then the 68th Second Avenue, there was another temple before they went to Brooklyn. And so I would sometimes hear the chink, chink, chink in the drums in the distance. Oh, that sounds like a pretty good beat. And I would go, and at this time, it's just the Hare Krishnas, I can't play with them. I was on a different level. I didn't have any spiritual inclination at that point. So I went through a bunch of changes, and eventually I got quite ill with hepatitis. Mm-hmm. And when I came out of that, this was in 69. By that time, I'd been exposed to Eastern thought and Eastern music, Ravi Shankar and things like that. And so I thought, well, let me try this yoga. I've heard about yoga. And so I started doing yoga. And many devotees know Amala Bhakta Swami. He has made a lot of recordings. He's in LA now. He's over 80 years old at this point. He had a studio on the east side of New York. And so I started going in there. And that's where I became exposed to Hatha Yoga mostly, but he also taught us the Krishna Mantra. Some of you will recognize this mantra, especially if you've been initiated. Om apavitra pavitro vasa vavastam gatopiya yasmare padanindaksham yabbayam ventarasuchi. That was the first verse I ever learned. And I would chant that on my way in and out of the city. It was a Krishna mantra. I don't know if I knew the meaning of it at the time. But that was my first exposure. And eventually I went to another yoga studio, and we did some meditation, and we needed a mantra to chant. And I started Om, but Om was really hard to meditate on. So they had published a little booklet on the glories of the Hare Krishna mantra, who the guru had been apparently running a nonstop kirtan in South Africa for 25 years. So there was Anyway, I thought, this is my meditation mantra. I should chant this one. And then in another yoga group, I met a fellow who a very nice Indian gentleman who loved Ram Leela. He would tell him about Ram Leela, and he said, "Why don't we go down to the Hare Krishna temple in Brooklyn?" I'd never heard of it. And I had a car. We had no car. He had no car. So, okay, we'll go down on Sunday night. And that was my first exposure on Sunday night, at one of the Sunday feasts. But it was all too much for me. I was much more into more in personal and meditative, and all this chanting and dancing, and then these fellows in orange with these huge plates of prasadam. I was into raw food, juices and raw food. And it was just, oh my God. But I said, okay, I'll try the halwa, And once I tried a little something, I was hooked on the prasadam. And so I started coming back. And one of those visits when I came back to the temple, and meanwhile, the devotees were so wonderful there. They were very friendly. And so when I came, there was a shop that they had. And I went into the shop, and there was a devotee who was really into selling books there. And so I bought the first book I bought was Krishna book. And with all the pictures and everything, But I wasn't ready for all that Leela. I was more into the philosophy. There's plenty of philosophy there, but it was a little bit too much for me. But when I bought the TLC, the first Teachings of Lord Chaitanya, this book really got me fascinated. All the philosophy there, and about bhakti, and the Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, all of that. So that intrigued me, and it kept me coming back to the temple. And eventually, the job I had, which was a job in a hospital. There's a whole story, but I don't want to tell the whole story. It'd take too long. But Krishna arranged for me to think that I could change jobs and have more time for yoga. I would do the night shift. But then when I tried doing the night shift in the new hospital, it was too spooky. It was like, everyone was asleep, and there were a lot of people die in hospitals, and it was just too much for me. And I was chanting, and I was more attracted to the temple. So I said, I might as well just join that temple. And so I've joined in March. It's just been my 49th anniversary of joining at the end of March in 73. And I was so happy there, because that was the other yoga studios, you had to stop chanting and do, but this one, the more you chanted, the more they liked you. And I was really into chanting Hare Krishna, So that's how I joined. And it was a wonderful temple. It was probably the second most populous temple in the movement at that time. The other being Los Angeles, New Dwarka. So, and all the artists were there, and Bhardraj, a wonderful kirtan leader, and it was just a wonderful place. So I never thought, oh, I can't take this, I want to leave. It just didn't happen like that. It was just like I was ready, and I was blessed by Krishna. So that was my first book, and it really got me interested in understanding the philosophy more and more, because I was philosophically inclined, And then when the Bhagavad-Gita, the classes, we had of course, Bhagavad-Gita classes. I was always, it's because I was a musician, so I was always into the rhythm of the Sanskrit. I remember as a bhakta, I'm cleaning the devotees' plates, and I'm reciting the latest verse I learned from Bhagavad-Gita. Probably had the book, I was always into the Sanskrit. And so that was another great attraction of the books, the aesthetics of the language. We didn't have any CC at that time. It was all Sanskrit. So I was enthralled with that. And I was always, I was at home. And then when I got the little, in with the proofreading, that's eventually I was asked to edit some things in Back to Godhead magazine. And that was my first job as an editor. And then the whole thing moved to LA, and there was a big marathon. The 17 books in 2 months, and that's famous. So I was there for that.
Oh, wow.
And I got to edit 4 or 5 chapters in the Antya-lila, and about the same number in the 5th canto. So I was able to participate in that. And that was an amazing, experience. And Prabhupada wrote a letter eventually to Ramaswar and company, meaning for the whole press, and said, anyone who participated in this is going back to Godhead. So that was encouraging. I have that letter here. Anyway, I like to explain that I had a fault-finding nature, and Krishna was able to engage that in how I would find little mistakes in the books, and correct them as a service. So it was, and I just took to, I remember the prayers of Queen Kunti, how I memorized some of those, and Prabhupada's books to me were like what should I say, a source of life and source of enlivenment in devotional service. And I think we're going to go through some of that. You know, the importance of reading and relishing Prabhupada's books for your own spiritual health on a regular basis. I think that's what the theme is here. And I was just found it so enlivening, the classes and the study and sharing with other devotees. In those days, there were a bunch of us who were memorizing verses, and we used to, nothing was electronic. We had these little index cards, and you write on the card, they listen to this verse, but okay, yeah, that's a great verse. Let me learn that verse. And this way, you gradually, increase your repertoire. And then when in the Bhagavatam, but especially in CC, there was what I called nectar verses. They weren't really preaching verses, but they were verses about Lord Chaitanya or describing Vrindavan, and that just opened up a whole new area, of like just doing bhajan with shlokas. That's also that possible. So this is part of what I appreciated Prabhupada's books. They're great treasures. And then when I was able to work on the continuation of the Bhagavatam, because Prabhupada, as you know, he wasn't able to finish, so he finished with 13 chapters of the 10th canon. Right. So I went down to Miami in '83, and I got to work with Gopi Paranananda Prabhu and Ridinanda Das Goswami in completing the Bhagavatam. That was 6 years of that was like the greatest service you could imagine, to be able to meditate on Krishna's pastimes and work, like that. So that was great. And then we came here in '89, and a lot of my service has been going through the old books and finding, revisions, which is somewhat controversial, but I can explain that, give you some example if you're interested, because that's part of, the legacy of Prabhupada's books for 10,000 years. That they should be, as he said himself in 1977, in a famous conversation in July of '77, that the book should become free of mistakes. They should be gone through, and his trusted editor should go through and find things that need to be fixed for posterity. So I've been doing a lot of that with the first with the Ishopanishad, then with the Krishna book, then with the TLC itself. And then there's, of course, the CC. We went through the whole CC, and now we're going through Bhagavatam. And I can give some examples. I think you'll appreciate, the dear listeners will appreciate. Anyway, that's my career. And always, I've been giving a Bhagavad-Gita class since '89, not '83, since I joined Miami, to keep the evening program going. To get a class in Kirtan. And then when I came here, I started doing it. So it used to be 4 nights a week. Now it's 3 nights a week. But that's kept me very enlivened. Now with Zoom, there's people all over the country who listen. I'm not a big timer, 10,000 hits or anything like that, but it's people.
It's so encouraging and inspiring to hear from you. I mean, it's obvious that your life has been so much centered around Prabhupada's books.
Absolutely.
And also from the very beginning, you felt that attraction to the shlokas, to the philosophy.
Oh,
yeah. That's you're the right person for this kind of interview.
And I have several verses that some of the listeners may know about drinking the nectar of Krishna Katha and the effect of that. There's one that I wanted to share. Let's see, at the very end of chapter 3, I think, in the second canto. Prabandhi Bhagavata Atmanak Satam Katamatam Shavanaputesha Sambritam Punantite Vishahi Vidushitashayam Vajanti Tachadana Sadoro Hantikam. It has this nice beat, So those who drink through the ears the nectar Krishna Katha, Prabandhi Bhagavata Atmanak, of the Lord, who is very dear to them, the devotees, Katamatam Shavanaputesha Sambritam, and who are fully satisfied by drinking that nectar. They purify, punanti, they purify the polluted aim of life known as sense gratification. And they return back to Godhead, to a place nearby the lotus feet of Krishna. What more do you want as an advertisement for reading Prabhupada's books? And, with devotees, sharing. I mean, that's an excellent part of it, That's a great way to read the books, is in a small group and sharing, and you can have a whole program and you can enlighten each other. There's verse about that in the 11th canto, how that's what devotees do, Parasparam katanam. Right in the Gita, it says, 10th chapter, text 9. Matchitam gataprana bodhiyantak parasparam katayantastamam nidam tushandi chadamanticha. This is devotees meet together, that they place their minds on me, they dedicate their lives to me, and then they get together and glorify me together, and thus they feel very satisfied and enjoy spiritual happiness. Tushyanti chadamanticha. This is the essence of the society for Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada says in one lecture that I started the society to give people a chance to hear about Krishna in a systematic way, and that's still going on.
I think that's very essential what you just highlighted, that this is all about, to developing this taste in hearing about Krishna and encouraging each other. So yeah, I think that's a very great start to talk about the importance of reading Prabhupada's books.
Yes, absolutely.
So when we say, why it is important to read Srila Prabhupada's books, I mean, that would be a possible answer. Would you like to speak more? Why is it important that we read and that we read regularly and absorb ourselves in Srila Prabhupada's books?
Yeah. Well, there's that famous little saying that's become, books are the basis, preaching is the essence, utility is the principle, and purity is the force. So, but it starts with books are the basis. And what are these books? These books that Prabhupada famously said, those purports are my emotional ecstasies. And if you really want to know me, read my books. I put everything in my books. So, when you understand the philosophy a little bit, you read, you see the importance of getting the association and taking advantage of that association of pure devotees of Krishna. Now, where was the pure devotee? In the West, outside of India, it was impossible to find. You may have had, and Prabhupada pointed out, so many translations of the Bhagavad-Gita, which is famous. But nobody was becoming a devotee because of the translation or whatever commentary there was not being given by the pure devotee. And therefore, it didn't have the potency to really impart that faith in the process of devotional service. I read the Bhagavad-Gita before I joined, a little Penguin edition. I don't think there were any purports or anything. I thought it was interesting, fascinating, but I had no idea what I was supposed to do. It wasn't a program for action, which is really what the Gita is. But then when you come upon Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita and you start reading the purports, there is that quality of course, devotion and absolute faith, and also the urgency. You can understand that this book, that he's giving us instruction for our benefit out of his own compassion and mercy. And when you read how he produced the books with such great effort and meditating on every word, that it's not just some academic exercise, but this is an act of mercy and act of compassion. He wants to be, as he so many times said, the transparent medium through which Krishna's words are coming and the whole philosophy is coming. And when that transparency there means that purity is there, that can affect you. I mean, there's so many stories daily. Vijay Prabhu is here, the book distributing minister. He's here in the temple. He's been here for 2 years. And he has so many stories. He's producing a book with many more. And he's also making book distributors. And they go out and tell their own stories. How people are becoming so fascinated with the books, and they're coming to the temple, becoming devotees. And so those of us have the chance to read the books every day. It's renewing our faith and giving us filling our minds with the philosophy and with the experience of Krishna's Leela and Lord Chaitanya, of course, and giving us the confidence and the enthusiasm to pursue our practice of bhakti. And of course, there's a progression. At a certain point, it becomes a given. In other words, I have a word that I made up. You'll never understand the meaning till I explain it. How's it go? Oh, Mantu Jagvi Gukla. Any idea what that means? These are the first letters of the morning program. Mangalarti, Tulsi Puja, Japa, greeting, Guru Puja, and class. Mantra Jagri Gukla. And I've been trying to do that, for all these years. It's like and this is what Prabhupada set up, and each element is so important. But especially, Prabhupada emphasized the class. The class is essential every morning in Bhagavatam to keep us enlivened and enlightened in devotional service, to give us, there's a verse, there's always a verse. This verse, I did a little poetry, I don't know if you know, some English poetry too. And you may recognize this verse. This is in the beginning of Lord Chaitanya's teachings to Sanatana Goswami about the Abhideya, the practice of devotional service. So it goes like this. Kama dinang katina katita palita duniteshas. Tesham jata mayna karuna nattupano prashantihi. Utsrijaitan atayodupate sampratam labdha buddhis tvamayatak shadanamabayam mandiyung svatmadasye. So what this means is, I put it in a poem. In how many ways have I sought to obey the seductive demands of my wicked desires? They've shown me no mercy, yet on I've gone shamelessly trying to quench lust's unquenchable fires. But now I'm rejecting those hellish desires, for my higher intelligence now has awoken. O Krishna, O shelter of fearlessness, please let me serve you with faith that will never be broken. And the key element is that the higher intelligence has awoken, that giving you the inspiration and the strength to reject the demands of the senses and the demands of the mind, which is what Maya is all about. But you can't give up your nature to serve. You've been serving those desires for so long, and you've been going birth after birth and all this. But now you're rejecting them, but you can't reject the service attitude. So you're approaching Krishna. Please let me serve you, your faith with that. That's the whole essence of what we do in bhakti, is to try to take the senses, the mind, whatever we have, and connect it to Krishna by the process of devotional service, so that the takes place and we get vairagya. This is yukta vairagya. But you can only have the vairagya that's firm and steady when you're tasting, when you get the taste for Krishna bhakti. And it all begins with the purification of the intelligence. And that's a daily process, because in this Kali Yuga, it's so easy to get impure again. So this daily, of course, chanting, the whole process, chanting and hearing the holy name is essential, basic. But chanting and hearing the Shastra is also essential. And Prabhupada gave us all these books to convince us, to impart the faith, and to, on a regular basis, increase our taste more and more for Krishna Katha, which is really the essence of the process that we have, the hearing and chanting, so that we can, once and for all, give up this attraction to the material energy and be completely attracted to Krishna. So the books play an essential role in that. And that brings up one of my changes you'll be interested in. Many devotees know the prayers of Queen Kunti. Prabhupada was very, he loved those prayers. It's a tape he made of them, and he would often quote them. So there's a verse there where Kunti is explaining Janmaishaya Shuddha Shibir. You know this verse? Janmaishaya Shuddha Shibir Edamana Balakpaman. Naiva Hatti Vidatam Tvai Tvamakinchana Gocharam. Now, if you allow me, I brought it up on the computer. And I'd like to give you the old translation and the actual translation. And this is based on Prabhupada's own first canto that he brought from India. Is it? So this is the verse 1.8.26, one of Queen Kunti's prayers. And the way it used to read, I fixed it in the Veda base. It's also been printed in, I don't know if you're aware, we have a little sampler Bhagavatam that we distribute, the first 8 chapters of the first canto. I don't know if you've seen that book, but I fixed it in there, but it hasn't yet fixed on the full set. So the way it used to read is like this: My dear Lord, my Lord, your Lordship can easily be approached, but only by those who are materially exhausted, period. One who is on the path of material progress, trying to improve himself with respectable parentage, great opulence, high education, and bodily beauty, cannot approach you with sincere feeling. Notice the approach rather than address. This is the way it appears in all the Bhagavatams. But I went back to when I reviewed this first canto, I was using the Delhi Bhagavatam, the original Bhagavatam, and seeing what Prabhupada actually wrote, because the whole purport is all about chanting the holy name. And here the synonym, if you look in the synonyms, abidatum is to address in feeling, but that became to approach. I said, how'd that happen? Anyway, what happened was that this because there was a period after exhausted, and the sense began with because, but in English, that's it didn't work, and so he discarded that because, the first editor, Hayagriva Prabhu, and he just began the second sentence, one who was on this path, and he didn't understand why the address was there, so he made it approached. But this is really what it's about. It's about chanting the holy name. Can easily be approached, but only by those who are materially exhausted. Because one who is on the path of material progress, trying to improve himself with respectable parentage, great opulence, high education, bodily beauty, cannot address you with sincere feeling. And if when you read the purport, it makes perfect sense, because it's all about chanting the holy name. Anyone can chant, but if you're at the same time intoxicated with Janma and Aishwarya, Shuddha, Shiva, these four different opulences, you can't chant with real feeling, with deep feeling. So that's why your kinchana gochara is so essential. You're approached easily by the materially exhausted. So that's why in Krishna consciousness we try to live as simply as possible and not get entangled in trying to increase these opulences, because this will prevent us from chanting with sincerity. So this is one of the now this other one, this is in the works now, and it's been approved by our review board. This famous verse 932, where we had this is the new and there's also a sentence in the translation, in the purport, that was restored, that was taken out for some reason. So the way it read before, it's a very famous verse. O son of Prita, those who take shelter in me, though they be of lower birth, dash, women, vaishyas, merchants, or shudras, workers, dash, can attain the supreme destination. Now, what that does is create one category of lower birth, and in that category is women, vaishyas, and shudras, you see? But that's not what Prabhupada wrote. That's not what he said. I can share that some other time with you, the original transcript. He didn't have this one overarching category. And so this is this four that's there, and Baladev Vidyabhushan has it. That this is how the translation will read. O son of Prita, those who take shelter of me, though they be lowborn, women, vaishyas, merchants, or shudras, workers, can attain the supreme destination, or hopefully will attain the supreme destination. And then in the purport, you have a sentence which plays off that new translation. Whatever qualities one may have that are due to taking birth in a high or low family, or being a woman or mercantile man or merchant, or belonging to a lower class, are forgotten. So this is a very significant adjustment, and it's right in line with what Prabhupada gave us originally, and that there's four separate classes here, and rather than one overarching class of lower birth. So this is what I've been doing, and it's a demanding work. And this is also when I read the books, because I read through the whole CC recently. I'm reading through the Bhagavatam again. I'm always reading something. I'm always watching out for, is this correct, and I just make a note of it, and then later on I check it with the original transcript and see if there's an actual mistake there. So this is kind of a unique way of reading. Most devotees just read through, but I can't do that, because if I say, wait a minute, is this actually what Prabhupada said? So that's one of the way, the main way that I read is that I'm reading, and I'm going through Krishna book again and again. Bhagavad-Gita we've been through 10 times already or more, and I'm saying, wait a minute, and I make a note of it like that, So, but it's but I realize, one of these things is this is for a legacy. I mean, these books are going, as Prabhupada said, going to be the law books for the next 10,000 years. So now is our chance to make them as perfect as we possibly can, because the history of book production, devotees should know, especially the early books, and that includes the Bhagavad-Gita. The devotees, Prabhupada was dictating, meant it went faster, but that meant that you rely on the transcriber. The first transcriber wasn't even a devotee. He just walked into the storefront, 22nd Avenue, and he was a student hanging out with the Hare Krishnas as part of his class. This is a new age religion. So they asked him, "Do you know how to type?" "Yes." "Do you know how to transcribe?" "Yes." So he was really good at transcribing, but he couldn't hear the Sanskrit, and he got Prabhupada's accent and all these. So there was a problem with that, and the Sanskrit editors were just starting, and everything. So the Bhagavad-Gita needed a lot of work, and Jayawada Swami did a tremendous job on that. It came out in 83, and still we're finding little things that need to be adjusted. But devotees should have faith. We don't have an agenda. They're trying to have devotees do this. There's one. I don't want to get off on this too much, but in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, those are familiar with the book, Madhya 19 is teachings to Rupa Goswami. And of course, there's that famous verse, Brahmanda Brahmate Kom Bhagyavan Jeev, Guru Krishna Prasadai Pai Bhakti Lata Bij. The planting of the seed of the creeper of devotion comes if the fortunate souls wandering up and down the universes gets the association of a qualified guru, and by the mercy of the guru and Krishna, the seed of devotion is planted in his heart. Then you have to water the seed, right, with hearing and chanting and so many things. So in those purports, Prabhupada, he's talking about the essential nature of association, to keep that watering that seed, hearing from devotees and hearing and chanting. So then he has this sentence. Which is right from the transcript, but the first printing in 75, which was done very, very fast. That's the marathon, and all kinds of mistakes entered in there. It was understood, but we have to go back and fix it. That if one doesn't think there's any pure devotees in the Hare Krishna movement, one can keep direct company with the spiritual master, and more or less that was it, But there was a very important sentence was left out there. There was, I think, a line skipped in the editing, which is done very fast. And the way it reads now is, even if one thinks that there are no pure devotees in the Hare Krishna movement, still one should stick to the society. And if you feel that there's still a problem, then you can keep company with the spiritual master. That sense of sticking with the society. So now when devotees read that, they say, "Oh, this is just." The editors are trying to serve the GBC because they don't want people. They think that Prabhupada didn't say that. But Bhurijana Prabhu, who was there at the time, Prabhupada, and there's a whole story how he came to Hong Kong. Bhurijana and his wife were practically there alone. They were getting influenced by some devotees from Hawaii. They had stopped the morning program. So Prabhupada went there and he got on their case, chastising. And this purport, that sentence was written for him. He had him hear the tape even before it was transcribed. He brought him into the office, said, "Listen to this." And there it was, even if you think there are no pure devotees, you still stick to the society. So he stuck to the society. And now with the Bhurijana, we know now, is because Prabhupada made the special effort there. But he can testify. So that's for all of us, is that Prabhupada wanted us to stick to the society because he knew that if we get away from ISKCON, we'll pick up so many things from his godbrothers or this or that, and many just fall away. So that's a very important lesson, and this was restored to the purport there. So that's my, kind of a unique relationship with the books, where I'm saying, oh, it should be like this, it should be like this. And sometimes big sections were left out in the Krishna book. This I did in 1994. I was at Korsnes Garden. This is Harikesh Swami's, ascendance there. And for 2 months, was it 2 months? At least 6 weeks, I stayed there, and all I did was meditate on Krishna book. And one lady had gone through and listened to all the tapes. This is unique in that we have the tapes for Krishna book, almost all of them, because Jadharani, bless her heart, wanted to hear the pastimes that she painted. So when the tapes came into Boston, Prabhupada was dictating them in LA for transcribing. He would reuse the tape, so frugal, record over. But she had them made into standard size cassette tapes. These are special tapes for dictating. And then she was able to listen to that. And those tapes survived. And so we could listen to what Prabhupada actually said, And so she would listen and read. And so we said, wait a minute, Prabhupada said this, and it says this in the book. And she would make a note of it. And then I came back after her and said, yeah, there's something missing here. And so there's restoration in the Krishna book. since 95 or 94. Anyway, so as far as reading, there's, you can ask some of the more other questions now, because I've kind of gone off on that tangent, but this is my special relationship with the books.
No, thank you for addressing this point, and certainly this is a concern.
Because it's an issue,
there was just an article published on the ISKCON News, book changes controversy coming to a close.
Yeah.
There was.
We don't know who wrote that. I didn't write it.
Oh. But maybe, before we go back to the reading part, but maybe you can just say a few words about the editorial review panel.
Yes.
Maybe that's in this connection, maybe good too.
So this issue has been percolating for quite a while, since the new Gita was published in '83. And Jayawati Swami did that. He was touring. He would explain. He and I wrote something in '97 called Responsible Publishing, giving so many examples from the different books and explaining the rationale. And he answered many questions about the Gita changes and like that. But it's been a constant issue, because there are many devotees, especially who grew up in the movement, and Macmillan Gita, the first unabridged Gita, was so important for. They maybe became devotees. They distributed, and they wonder, why was this changed? Why was this changed? And all these things. So this has been going on for years. I went to Mayapur several times, did some seminars on the changes. But there was no resolution to it. So back in it was 2018. I went to Tirupati. There was a mid-year GBC meeting at that time. This was, of course, before the pandemic. And I went there, and there was a proposal to have a panel of what we call a blue ribbon panel of devotees who would review the revisions and either accept them or question them. And then we would have on our side, we'd have what we call now an editorial review board. It's not just me, but myself and Nagaraj Prabhu and Kaishori. Jayawati Swami, he's kind of retired. He's doing something else now. But so that's where we've been. And the first book that we're working on is the Gita, the unabridged Gita. And so they went through. I was able to produce a document that showed all the changes that had been made on the Macmillan Gita. And so they're reviewing that, and they accepted most of them, almost all of them. But some they have questions about. And so that's what came out of that Tirupati meeting. This editorial review panel, which are going to go through all the revisions. And when they have a question or a doubt, or they want to make a suggestion, they'll come, and then we'll process it through the editor. And if there is some disagreements, that'll go to the BBT, and I think the GBC will have a commission and review like that. And gradually we'll be able to reconcile and come up with hopefully a final Bhagavad-Gita as it is. Now, that's not going to satisfy everybody, because people that know, what about this? But it has the GBC behind it, and the BBT trustees, and that's how we're trying to resolve this issue.
Yeah.
But it's a process; it's going on.
Yeah.
They say it's coming to an end. I don't know if it's coming to an end.
Still a little.
I think that Ranjit probably wrote that. He's in Alatra, and this BBT Books, which I didn't know what that was, but it's in Alatra. He's there, and he's worked with the archives for many years. So I think he wrote it. So that's what that was all about.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Sure.
So that we touched on that topic also. Now, we mentioned, when you started to speak about the importance, you mentioned about associating and how Prabhupada basically make that point. If you want to know me, you should read my books.
Yes.
How do you experience Srila Prabhupada's presence in his books? Being a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, when you open the books, what does it mean that Prabhupada lives in his books? How do you experience that?
Well, it's the fact that whatever book you read, you're associating with the author in an intimate way.
Yeah.
That's why it's really important to read Prabhupada's books, and other books, that some important other books that come out that are by devotees, because as soon as you read other things, then they're being influenced by the mentality and the personality of the person who's writing it. So, reading is a kind of hearing, in a sense. You're hearing, in your mind. But those who've had the experience of reading with other devotees know that it's even more powerful when you can hear and even discuss. That's really the epitome of reading Prabhupada's books, read in association. Satam prasangan mama virya samvido, the famous verse from Lord Kapila Dev, that it increases your faith, increases your bhakti, and you can realize just by this is the easiest process of yoga, is to get together and hear and chant about Krishna. So the thing about the special quality of Srila Prabhupada's books, we're in his society, we're following the process of bhakti that he designed specifically for us, and it's just like I feel that as soon as you open Prabhupada's books, this is pleasing to Prabhupada. In other words, to read his books, to hear from him, and to not just hear and read, but there's also that memorizing thing of taking passages. Of course, I like to take the Sanskrit and sometimes memorize the English. But basically to like I remember so well, I don't have it word for word, but the verse in the 4th canto about the special quality of the voice of the pure devotee. And it's like mixed with the saffron mercy particles from Krishna's lotus feet. Do you remember that? It's such a famous, and I said, yeah, and Prabhupada was so eager to have his lectures recorded. And it was, I heard something recently, some interview, or I think it was of devotees who were there at the time. We didn't know why. It was kind of a trouble because a lot of it was recorded, and the only ones on this weren't reel to reel. They have to transfer it to cassettes and everything. But now devotees are so thankful that devotees took the trouble to do that. You can listen to Prabhupada in 26th Avenue. So I identify, or I'm reminded of when I read Prabhupada's books, the lectures, his voice, etc., his personality, the things you read in the Lilamrita, all the details of his life and everything. In other words, you're associating with Srila Prabhupada, and you mentioned there one of the questions about seeing the world through the eyes of Scripture. The Shastra Chakshus, we're meant to do that. So I'm reminded, because knowing Prabhupada and so many videos now and everything, you can see how he related to the world in a different way than in a Krishna conscious way. He was seeing Krishna everywhere in everything, and he was taking advantage of an audience, who were interested, to give them insights in the morning walks and so many things, and through his books. So, I mean, isn't that the intent that Krishna has in the chapter 7? Rasoham apsukonteya prabhasmi sasisuriya pranavaksava vedeshu. If you actually remember these verses, or you read them, then drinking a glass of water is never the same. You can say, "Oh, yes, this is Krishna's energy. Yes, Krishna's giving us this water. He's so kind. The sunshine, all of these different things." So in this way, you can, and this was the intent, that okay, it's hard to remember my beautiful form all the time. But I just heard Prabhupada talking about this. When are you not seeing the sunshine? When are you not drinking water? You're doing one of those things all the time. And you see, he goes through all the senses. So it helps us to be Krishna conscious, even when we're apart from devotees. We're just walking down the street, or the super soul and everyone. You start to see, especially for me. This is, I don't know if is the intelligence everywhere. Is that nothing is by accident. You look at whether it's the piece of grass or the buildings. It's obviously human intelligence, but the design, the organization is incredible. I like to just point the human body is such an incredible machine, right? It has to, I remember as a child we learned, yes, the temperature is 98.6. That's the normal temperature. It didn't dawn on me, well, why 98.6? Why not 100? Because that's what makes the body work nicely. If you have 100 and you have a fever, that is a disease. So the world itself becomes an instance. What is it called? A stimulus, or udipana. Udipana is an instance for remembering Krishna. So we're meant to remember Krishna always. So if you're reading Bhagavad-Gita, you're absorbing it and discussing, then you can see everything can remind you of Krishna. If you're receptive to it, if you have that in your mind and your intelligence is cued to that. And you can see Krishna's actions everywhere, you know. So that's one of the great benefits of reading Prabhupada's books, is you begin to see Krishna manifest everywhere. The whole thing of the pregnancy in the Kapila Dev's teachings, you know, the child in the womb. You remember it? I remember reading that. My God, how do they know that? This is incredible. When the child awakens and what he thinks, you know, and so all of that helps you to be Krishna conscious and see things in your own environment, and it also gives you ideas for how to present the books if you're a book distributor. You know, there's so many things coming from the books. So anyway, there's unlimited value to reading Prabhupada's books, staying saturated and sharing with other devotees insights. And of course, I like to share verses and things like that, especially. And the devotees appreciate it sometimes.
Maybe you could also explain to the devotees why is it important to learn shlokas. You know, some devotees feel like, what's the use of just, you know, it's hard to remember and it's Sanskrit, and why should I bother about this?
Yeah.
So what are the benefits of learning shlokas?
You know, there's a whole series of lectures that Prabhupada gave. There's a slideshow. I can send this. Maybe you can make it available, because you're going to do more of these. Of what, you know, what's the importance of learning shlokas? Well, one thing is that Prabhupada says, even if you don't understand the meaning, the sound of the Sanskrit verses is potent and will help to purify you. You know, I mean, just like a child, you know, comes into a kirtan, what does he know? You know, but just being there, the sound of the holy name, all of the verses of the Bhagavatam are transcendental. They're potent in drawing us to Krishna. So there's that. There's also, there's a whole book of shlokas produced earlier. Why learn shlokas? One is to make our presentation more authoritative. Because oftentimes, you know, we speak, we may be in India or in any of the Western countries, there's so many Indians, you know, they're like, but also it helps you to know, oh, this is the very words of Krishna. This isn't my words. Prabhupada would often quote this verse, Namam dushkrita no mudha papadyante nararama. You know, those who don't surrender unto me are Buddhas, the lowest of mankind, right? So Prabhupada says, I'm not saying, people get angry at me, I'm not saying, this is Krishna saying. So when you can quote Krishna or any verse from Bhagavatam, which is, you know, by Vyasadeva, also Krishna, is authoritative, then you can feel confident in your presentation, and you get more inspired that, you know, Krishna's in there. He's the super soul, right? And he's giving you inspiration to use that verse or another verse that's from mine. This is how Prabhupada gave lectures that expands on your message. Just like if you want to convince people to chant the holy name, it's nice to know the verse. Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama eva kevalam kalo nasteva 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 gata danyata. This is sometimes the first verse devotees memorize because it's an easy one. It's to repeat it again and again. So this is such an important verse. Yes, you know, in this age, I put it into a poem. If you want to achieve the supreme goal of life in this age, when dissension and chaos abound, there is no other way, there is no other way, there is no other way that can ever be found but to chant Krishna's name, but to chant Krishna's name, but to chant Krishna's name with a stout-hearted vow. And to pray, oh Lord Krishna, O friend of the poor, let my head ever unto your lotus feet bow. I added that last part because I needed another line. But that's kind of Trinata Pisuna Chena, you know. So this is, and even if they're not Indians, you know, if you quote a Sanskrit verse and you give it lends weight to your presentation. Now, this is not my idea. This is Krishna's idea. So that's one main reason for learning, both for our own enlivenment, for you're preaching to the mind, you know. And if you got the mind is hearing, you know, manmana bhakto manjaji mam namaskar. Oh, okay. Krishna telling me, think of me, become the Lord. You always got to be preaching to the mind. The mind is a rascal. So there's that aspect of making our presentation more authoritative, giving us more confidence in what we say, because it's backed up by a verse. This is exactly what Prabhupada did. And then there's a whole aspect of enlivenment, you know, the aesthetics, the meter, you know, which is unique in all languages. You can't do all these things. And you find so many of that in Prabhupada's books, especially in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. I was just so enthralled when the CC started to come out, because the verses were like, different meters that you don't even find in the Bhagavatam. And so I remember right at the beginning, there's that verse, Anarpita chadim charat karunayavatir nakarao samapihitamannato tvararasam sampakti shriyam ahadi purata sundara jutikadamba sandipita sadavadi akandare spurata vakshachi nandana. So this is a blessing verse. Part of Mangalacharan is to give blessings to the readers. May that Supreme Personality of Godhead, known as the Son of Srimati Shachi Devi, be forever situated in the innermost chambers of your heart. Resplendent with the hue of molten gold, he has appeared in this age of Kali after a long time to bestow what no other incarnation has ever given before, the highest, most sublime and brilliant mellow of devotional service, the mellow of conjugal love, Krishna. It's right there at the beginning of the CC. So that meter appears in it. So this is a way of becoming so enlivened by Prabhupada's books, sharing it with others, and getting other devotees to also open the books and discover the treasures within. So that's one of the reasons why memorizing is so nice. And if you want, I've recorded many things. I can get my email, dravida108@gmail. I recorded the whole Padyavali, which is Rupa Goswami's own nectar file. These are his favorite verses, very famous book. And a few of them are by him. The Shikshastika appears in there, scattered around. It wasn't written as an Ashtaka. It was collected by Krishna's Kaviraj. That's how we have it. But there are, so many beautiful verses about the holy name, about Vrindavan, about Lord Chaitanya, to share there. So that's a great treasure, obviously. That's how I read. Pick up the jewels, put them in your pocket. Once you have it memorized, you can call on it any time, and it's enlivening for the mind. It's and sharing it. What else is there?
So thank you so much, Prabhu, for sharing all this nectar. I think slowly we can talk a little bit before we come to an end about studying. We spoke about the importance. How do you make sure to have enough time for studying? I mean, of course, in your case, most probably it's part of your service.
I'm reading, yeah.
It's every day. But maybe still you have some advice for devotees who may be busy and feel it's hard to find time, or they have different obstacles in reading. How to overcome obstacles in reading, and what would you advise devotees in general?
Yeah, well, I think one thing is, the importance of association. Mm. If you're reading with someone who's really into the book, you'll catch that. That'll you'll be like an association. Sangat Sanjay Dekama. So that's important. There are so many wonderful opportunities online now, because so many people are spread out. You may not be near a temple, but so many classes. Of course, ISKCON Desire Tree. You have all of that audio you can always hear. And then Dandavats.com is practically all videos now, of devotees giving classes. They even put me on there for some reason a couple of times. But so it's good actually to spend the time hearing from those who are really steeped in the books and steeped in the culture and are very learned. And Bhurijana Prabhu, this is another thing. He has produced, I think I have on my shelf here. He's a teacher. He taught in the Gurukul early on in the 80s, and he's a natural teacher. So here's the Unveiling the Lotus Feet, detailed overview of the Srimad-Bhagavatam Cantos 1 through 4. And so this book is wonderful with insights and ways of seeing how the verses relate to each other and different themes that are observed. And so these kind of aids, and I think he has also the second one out now, but this is quite a big tome. But these throughout, you have so many study aids. Of course, you have Bhakti Shastri. You can do that online, which is also systematic reading. I remember we used to have it here every week, and I did at one point the part on Ishopanishad. And of course, teaching it really means you meditate on it, the different verses, the questions, and things like that. So these facilities are there if you really want to do it. And now so much is online. You don't have to be near a temple. It helps, it's always nice to be near a temple for kirtan and deities and classes. But just explore. And if you're really interested, I can provide some of these links or something to study aids. And so when you feel that you're part of a group and you're passing, you're doing Bhakti Shastri or the other courses, then that itself is an impetus to read. I don't want to fall behind, so I make time, to read this part of the Upanishad, the Bhagavad-Gita, whatever it is, and so I'll be ready. It's always a question of association. We want to put ourselves in a situation where we feel a little peer pressure, so that we'll give up this and this, which really isn't essential, and we'll instead spend time reading. I mean, my day is full. I'm there for 4 hours every morning for the morning program, and then I come back here. I mix up a smoothie, and I have a million different things. Devotees are writing me all the time. And what about this word? Is this the right word? There's so many things. And now is Vyasa Puja book time. I've been putting out the Vyasa Puja book with a few other devotees since about 1990. So that's more than 30 years. And they're trying to take it away from me now because, I have all this other stuff to do and I'm getting up in the years. So I try to focus on going through the books. But, that keeps me busy. But I always, I'm always giving that class, and I'm reading every day, going through Bhagavatam, as much as I can systematically. But there are these so many study aids that, if you're really interested, can help you. Mm-hmm. And what's wonderful is that when you do that, then your presentation or your association also is saturated with that, and devotees become interested in this way. The books become more enlivening because there's a systematic way. Sometimes it's overwhelming. The Bhagavatam is so huge, and I can't see how things relate to each other. And this is another technique that I've used quite often, is that you come a chapter, read through all the translations first, and then go back. And in this way, you get the overall view of what's happening and what the whole themes are. And so you can more see where the thing is going, and then when you read, because sometimes the purports, like we're in the 5th canto now in a morning class, and it's the Forest of Enjoyment, Judd Barrett teaching Mahugana. And I often think, well, okay, I mean, the way this is written, you can read the whole 3 chapters in an hour. But we're now in months now, we're going through all of the horrors of the material world, But it's good. We had Jaya Advaita Swami here, for a few days. He gave three lectures, and he's great. One of them was that the dangers of too much involvement in sex life. Perfect for sannyasi. Like that. So that helps to be at a temple where devotees will come. But that idea of going through and then having study aids, which I can help your listeners tune into. And then sharing with other devotees will keep you focused on the books, and enlivened.
Yeah, certainly, like the association with devotees, it just helps so much to.
Oh yeah,
get that. Earlier in the interview, you mentioned about how the Bhagavad-Gita is, you call it a program for action.
Oh yeah.
I like that term. Bhagavad-Gita is meant to be a program for action. So how to make sure that we apply what we read? I mean, because there is the study, but then there is also the application of all this knowledge. Yeah,
I mean, it's you have to see the essence of the Gita. Of course, comes out at the end. Of course, I put it into a little poem, but the idea is that it all culminates, all of Krishna's lessons culminates in Arjuna changing his orientation. Is that, finally he says, Kadashe Vachalang Tava, that yes, I will do as you say. My illusion has been destroyed by your mercy. Now I'm going to do as you say. So this is really symbolic, not symbolic, but an example for what we should do. Because we come to Krishna consciousness, we have so many attachments, such karma, we understand that the idea is, well, through the process, chanting on the holy names and the deity worship and everything we do as a sacrifice is meant, and tapasya is meant to purify. So when we can, like I remember reading the last verse of the 11th chapter. 11th chapter, of course, is famous for the incredible universal form, but at the very end, mat karma kunin, mat padamo, mat bhakta sangabharchitaha. Niyavaira savabhuteshu yaksamam etipandava. That one who is working for me, who sees me as the ultimate goal, padamo mad bhakta, my devotee, sangabharchita, gives up bad association with non-devotees. Niyavaira, having no enmity toward others, savabhuteshu, for anyone else, such a person certainly comes to me. And then in that purport, right in the beginning, Prabhupada said, this is the essence of the Bhagavad-Gita. As soon as I read that 40 years ago, or whatever it was, I immediately memorized the verse. And so the Gita is meant to give us a means by a touchstone, so to speak, so that we can come in contact with it and measure our activities against what the Gita is saying. Am I thinking of Krishna now? How can I, increase? Am I actually working for Krishna? Am I speaking of Krishna, not, Maya? So it helps us in we can apply it in our daily activities, so much of it. And at the same time, we can take, so many ideas from the purports and share them with others, both with the other devotees, as well as with the people who we're preaching to, maybe on the street, with trying to distribute books. We have some book distributors here. They joined maybe a year ago. And they, during the pandemic, we had an upsurge of people coming to take a shelter at the temple. And it was great. And some of them become book distributors, and they give their some stories, and they describe how they apply, from the Bhagavad Gita, this sloka, that sloka, and they tell people, you can the basic principle is you're not that body, and your transmigration of the soul. Dehinosmin yata dehi. This is a verse for everyone. You can tell people can become enlightened. A little bulb goes on. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I'm not the hand, I'm not the feet. That whole thing. But I am the knower of that, and that alone can get people to get coming back. Or a book like that. So this is how we can use the books or apply the ideas in the books in our own devotional life, and it keeps us enlivened and enlightened in Krishna consciousness. And then when there's a kirtan, you can see Krishna. Oh, he's the source of all this knowledge. In other words, there's a relationship building with Krishna when you read the Bhagavad Gita. He's the speaker of the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And if you're actually applying those ideas, then you can feel the purification take place. Okay, Krishna wants me to do this. I love this verse in the second chapter, first canto. There's a whole lesson there, Shrinbatam Sukata Krishna Punyashavana Kirtana Karindian Taksto Yabadari Vidunoti Suritsata, which is the basis of the lecture that's quoted in the Reservoir of Pleasure, by the way. I don't know if you know that. It's a lecture on that verse. So Krishna is in there, right? And when he understands that you're hearing about him, he purifies, he cleanses away the abundance. So this is a wonderful verse to remember, that Krishna is on our side. He's our friend. He wants us to become purified. And if we just hear about him systematically through the books, then that purification will take place. And what's the result? We can feel it. Less attraction to Maya and more attraction to Krishna. I'll tell one quick story. I don't know. Oh, I'm sorry, we're going over time. There's a devotee in Miami. He's been there forever. I think he joined in 1969. He's been there forever. And he's always been in Miami. His name is Das. He was the president at one time. He's still there. And I lived there for 6 years in the 80s working on Bhagavatam. So he told this story about one of his duties at one point was cooking some of the milk sweets for the deities for the next morning offering, para and burfi and sandesh, of course. So one time, I think there were 3 cooks. So he was the 2 others couldn't come for some reason. So he had to cook all the sweets. And he was like up all night doing it, and so the next morning he's making the offering. He's actually on the altar now, bringing and he looks at the deities, and he's startled. And he sees the deities smiling like they never smiled before, from ear to ear. And he said, this is a miracle, this is so enlivened by that, So this is an extreme example of something that many of us have experienced, that if you do some sincere service, some sacrifice over and above the call of duty, so to speak, some big festival you work real hard, then everything about Krishna is more attractive. The deities are smiling more. The holy name is just like nectar. You want to apologize for some devotee you offended 2 months ago. Okay. In other words, there's some advancement, and that purification is really the result of the process. It culminates, after all, in more and more attraction for Krishna. What is that ladder? From faith to love, nishta, ruchi, asakti, attraction for Krishna, and then bhava and prema. So the more ruchi you get, the more that you start to get attracted to Krishna, and that means that you're feeling free now from the pull of all of these other these contaminations, these attractions. That it's not that, okay, I got to of course we follow the 4 regs, I'm going to follow them. It's that, I don't want any of that stuff. Not just, I don't want meat, I don't want and intoxication. It's out of the question, because you're intoxicated with Krishna. It's a wholesome intoxication. No bad side effects. Hare Krishna. All right, I have to get going, and I think but let me close with one little sweet verse from Prabhupada's books that I put into a poem. The other one was a heavy-duty preaching verse. So this is a verse about chanting the holy name. Many of you're probably familiar. It's in the Antya-lila, and Haridas Thakur is meeting with the Raghunath Dasas there as an adolescent, and his friends, all about the holy name. And there's one smarta Brahmin who doubts that just chanting one name can bring a liberation, right? And he says, if that's not true, then I'll cut off your nose. You remember that? And Haridas says, if it's not true, I'll cut off my own nose, and they kicked out that Brahmin. So then they asked Haridas to explain this, so he recited this verse, and then he explained it. And I took that verse and the explanation and made it into a little song. So here's the verse. It has a wonderful beat to it. Anghak sanghadadakibang sakadudiyade vasakadadokasya tadanidi batamila jalading jayachitagang mangalang hare nama. When the moon is, so this here's the verse translation with the commentary by Haridas. When the moon is invisible, you got to go back 500 years. No electric lights, when there's no moon and there's no sun, it's very dark. When the moon is invisible, withered to nil, and the sun is long gone from the sky, then an ocean of darkness envelops this world, and the timorous fear they might die. But that thick pall of gloom is at once swept away when the first signs of sunrise appear, and the dawning of day gives assurance to all that in truth there is nothing to fear. In a similar way, when illusion holds sway and a soul has forgotten his Lord, then the darkness of ignorance covers his heart. Sin and suffering are his reward. But as soon as he says Krishna's name even once in a manner that doesn't offend, then his ignorance flees like the darkness at dawn, and his sin and his suffering end. So there's nothing to fear, for the sun of the name has appeared with his powers divine. In your heart may that sun, benedictive for all, become fixed and eternally shine.
Jai.
So that's all coming from Prabhupada's books. That's the inspiration. Okay.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Dravida Prabhu.
Okay.
I still would have more questions. Maybe we should reconnect another time. But thank you so much sincerely for sharing so much inspiration to us.
Okay, and just once again, my email address. I don't have a website. Dravida108@gmail.com. You can write me. I'll send in the poetry, or I'll give you links to any of the recordings, like Punjabi and Rupa Goswami's poems.
Great. Yeah.
You might be kind of just. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.
Name Rupa. Wonderful name. Thank you.
Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Jai. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.